my great pleasure to welcome Chief Rabbi Goldstein back to the school.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Always enjoy coming onto this campus. It's, I would say, the most beautiful school campus in the world, and I love Herzlia. It's such an amazing schooling system. So, what I wanted to talk to you today is about the concept of leadership. I've been Chief Rabbi for almost 18 years. That's a long time. I mean, that's basically it's about as long as you guys have been alive. We're standing here, I'm feeling a little bit old when I'm thinking about that, and that all of you here are about the age of 18. So, what I wanted to share with you is the concept of leadership. But let me start by asking you a question, because I know you're in grade 12, and I know there's some grade 11s here with us as well. But you're all starting to think about your life after school. And what that means, and the concept of leadership, and you may say, well, like, how are you going to be a leader next year, and what way are you going to be a leader? So I wanted to start our discussion, because it actually took me a number of years to learn what is the definition of leadership. You see, like, how would you define leadership? It's an interesting question. Anyone want to share? Maybe you can just share your name and just say how you. How would you define leadership? What does it mean to be a leader? Because I went through a process of internal growth when I started off in this position as Chief Rabbi, and I had a particular perception of what leadership was, and it turned out to be something completely different from what I imagined. Okay, so anyone want to share? I mean, yes.
My name's Taylor.
Yeah.
It's someone who you can look up to, and someone who's a role model, and
yeah. Okay, great. So leadership is when a leader is a person who's a role model. I can hear that. Does anyone else want to add something to that? Is there another model of leadership or another way of seeing the concept of leadership? Yeah.
It's where you're in a position of service and dedication to whatever it is that you devote to your time.
Yes, it's like service and dedication. So we've got two concepts of leadership, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in both. There's the idea of leadership as being a role model, leadership as being service. And anyone else want to add anything else before I share some of my own thoughts on it? One of the things that I learned, and I think both of you are right, and both the elements of service and role model in both, in the concept of leadership. One of the big things that I learned over the years is that when I started as Chief Rabbi, I started to think, okay, leadership is about leading people. Okay, and what does it mean to lead? So and in my mind was this concept, well, how do you lead people? It's like a shepherd with a flock, and then you lead the sheep. But I learned very quickly. I mean, I never actually articulated that to myself in my own mind because it would be a ridiculous thing. But at the back of my mind, I'm thinking you have to lead people to a destination. But what I learned very quickly, early on, was the fact that you can't lead. You see, and lead in that sense, and I'll tell you why. If you define leadership as leading people to a particular destination or leading people to where they should be going, actually what happens is you turn people into followers. Okay, and I know like on Twitter, so then you have followers. But to me, the concept of leaders and followers is actually disrespectful to people who are followers. Why should anyone follow another person? Because we're all created in God's image. We all are independent spirits. And you can't lead people like you lead sheep. Sheep, the shepherd comes and he says, okay, here's the flocks must go to a certain place. So you lead them. But with leadership with people, it's not that. And if a leader looks at the people or the community that they're seeking to lead as followers, then that is intensely disrespectful. And I would argue is actually ineffective for that reason. Because you have to respect the people that you are so-called leading. So what is leadership? If you're not leading people to a particular place, then what is it? So we had here two answers which are both very interesting. Role model and the concept of service. And if I would combine the two together, I would come up with this concept. To me, leadership is about influence. Okay? And I'm not looking to borrow from all the social media platforms. Are people followers or are they influencers? Okay, but the concept of influence, to my mind, is something which is which is much more respectful of people and much more authentic. So if you think about leadership as influence, what that means is this: we have the power to influence the people around you. And that's why I wanted to speak to you today. I know that, being in grade 12, some of you in grade 11, and as you start to prepare for your life as adults after you graduate from school, you're thinking about leadership. Leadership begins with the concept of influence, and the truth is it even starts right here, right now, in school at this moment, because leadership is not something we postpone, and in fact, what I think is the most powerful way to look at it is that we are all leaders because we are all influencers. And we all influence other people and are influenced by them. To be a human being is to be socially impacted by the people around you. If there's one fact of human behavior that is being established beyond all reasonable doubt, with study after study after study, and that is our behavior is deeply influenced by the behavior, the speech, the actions, the way of thinking and speaking of the people around us. We are influenced by each other because we are looking for cues. There are famous studies that have been done on this. One study, for example, there was an experiment which was done about where they had a person collapse. Obviously it was simulated. So a person pretends to collapse in front of a group of people. Then what they did was they had two versions of this experiment. In one version of the experiment, the people who were in the group were also planted, and they were told not to go forward to help. And then there were one or two people who were the subjects of the experiment. So you have a group of, 10 people, 7 or 8 of them are part of the experiment themselves. They don't go forward to help. And then you have another situation where they do go forward to help. So when they looked at the two scenarios next to each other, the difference of the responses was quite dramatic. Meaning, if you're in a group of people and someone collapses in front of you, but no one else in the group goes forward to help, then most of the time you won't go help. But if other people are helping, then you will. Because what happens? Someone collapses. You're looking for a social cue. Is this a time to help? What's going to happen? So you're looking, now you're thinking, should I help? But no one else is. Maybe there's something they know that I don't know. I'm looking for the cue. Should I help or shouldn't I? If other people go forward to help, then you say, okay, I've got my cue, now I want to help. So that's, we are taking cues from each other all the time. And that is the tremendous power of influence. So what I wanted to submit to you today is the definition of leadership is influence. And influence means the concept of impacting the behavior and the thinking of another person. Yeah?
Yeah, what about the dude that actually goes to help first though? Doesn't he, how you said it, we all are looking for cues, but the dude that went first did not look for a cue, he just went.
Right. So that's excellent point. So that's actually the idea of leading is to think like this: how can I be a source of positive influence on the people around me? How can I make a difference? It's exactly that point. How can I make a difference to the people around me? How can I be the person who's not waiting for the cue, but actually sets the cue in the first place? And that applies in all kinds of scenarios. So take, for example, and we think, well, we're not leaders, but we are influencers. Let me give you an example with one of the schools in Johannesburg. Someone was telling me, because I spoke about this topic at King David Linksfield High School to the grade 12s there, and then afterwards one of the teachers came and they gave me the following example. They have a child in a school, in another school that is in grade 8, and what was happening was they were forming WhatsApp groups, and there were certain kids who were left off the WhatsApp groups. And then comes the question, who's left off? And then if one of the kids feels, now I want to include that person who's been excluded from the group, they feel the pressure, I can't actually include them in the WhatsApp group because then I'm breaking with the accepted norms of this WhatsApp group, but yet they wanted to. There was a vulnerable child who had been excluded. And so there are scenarios like that which happen all the time, whether it's on WhatsApp platforms or it is in social environments. So that can be one space of it. What we do, how we talk, is it with compassion, is it with kindness, is it with respect? All of those things impact not just us, and not just the people we're interacting with, but they set the tone for how we engage with others. And then we realize that leadership is much closer to home than we think about it. Because in some ways, you know what, one of the most convenient ways of thinking about leadership, is that it belongs out there to somebody else. And you know what, one of the most convenient ways of leadership is to think about world events. So, and I know there's been a lot of outrage about Russia's terrible invasion of the Ukraine and the human rights abuses and the tyranny and the murder and the mayhem and everything that has gone in. And of course, and it's something which I've written about and also had a campaign here in the community to raise funds for people in Ukraine, etc. So I'm not undermining it for one moment. But actually, day to day, what does that have to do with how we lead our lives? And in some ways, it's easier to talk about Putin than to deal with a scenario in a social circumstance where someone is behaving like a Putin or a Russia to someone who is a Ukraine, but then one has to go in and defend that vulnerable person. It's much easier to pontificate about what's going on in Eastern Europe than it is actually to take a courageous decision right here, right now, about the kind of influence that I want to share with the people around me. And I think it's that sense of shifting leadership from being something which is out there to being right here, right now. And that's why what I would say to you, one of the most important qualities of leadership that I've learned over the years, more than almost anything else, is courage. Right? Courage. Like if leadership is about influence, firstly you have to know what's the good values that you want to share. But the other thing is the courage that it takes to be that source of good influence. And that's why, you know, part of what I wanted to share with you is this idea that since we're all leaders, therefore, and if we see ourselves in terms of influence, that influence needs to be for the good, but often it takes tremendous courage. And what I learned over the 18 years as being chief rabbi, the key moments of what I've had to do have required tremendous courage to do the right thing, and you can feel the pressure. Like, for example, at the height of state capture, when Jacob Zuma was the president, I took a decision at the time, which a lot of people in official community positions in the South African Jewish community disapproved of, and that is I came out openly against the president, firstly to join the marches of protest against him, marched on Parliament in Cape Town, marched on the Union buildings. I also changed the wording of the prayer in Shul. Instead of praying for the president, said we change that word to pray that we have a president who's morally worthy of this nation of heroes. And there were a lot of people who were very upset. How can I do that? How can I come out? I'm jeopardizing the Jewish community. It's not right. So my answer to all of them was, firstly, that is the blessing of living in a democracy. If you live in a democracy, you can actually challenge the president in public and you don't have to fear. I would say this, the day that as chief rabbi I cannot criticize a president in this country is the day that we can't live in a country, because then there's no freedom in it. You can only live in a free country, and that's one of the most incredible blessings about South Africa. You can say whatever you want, and your right to say it is protected, and you can say it without fear or favor. But there was a lot of pressure on me at the time not to say that. More recently, when there was a delay in the vaccines coming out, and I had spoken made months before in treaties to the government about the speed of it, saying that every day a vaccine for the COVID-19 virus is delayed, that will cost lives. And then there was delay in it, and I wrote a public letter calling on President Ramaphosa and his cabinet to repent for the deaths that they caused. Again, there was a torrent of criticism against me. How can I do that? How can I criticize the president in public in that fashion? But I felt lives were at stake, and you have to say the truth, and you have to be able to stand up for it. That is what leadership is about. It's about not being afraid to say the things which are important to be said. And the truth is, it may sound that to challenge a president, or when I wrote an open letter against President Ramaphosa for his positions on Israel, comparing it to apartheid, that also took a lot of determination to be able to do it. Now, what I would say is, it may sound like those situations took more courage, but actually, in situations that you find yourselves in your social circles, it requires just as much courage to include someone on a WhatsApp group when the whole group doesn't want that person on, and you say, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to look out for someone who's been excluded. That takes just as much courage as it does to write an open letter against the president. It's about courage of conviction, and it's about the idea that we have influence on other people, and that we need to use that influence for the good in order to make a difference. And that means thinking of yourself and saying, well, how can I make that influence? It's not just in terms of the ethics and the morality. It's saying, I want to be a member of the Jewish community. I would like to see the strengthening of Jewish values. If I do, am I going to leave that job just to the rabbis to worry about? Or am I going to be part of that change myself and say, listen, I want to get involved in Jewish life. I want to be part of what goes on at shul. I want to do things which can advance that. It's all a question of saying a sense of responsibility. Does it belong to the people with official leadership positions or not? And that's something which I wanted to present a challenge to all of you, to say to you, I would love you to be my co-partners in leading the South African Jewish community. To say, listen, how can we work together? And if you have ideas for things that we can do together, please email me and we can talk about it. We can have a discussion after today's talk. But it's really about saying, it's not saying, listen, well, there are official leaders of this Jewish community. There's the chief rabbi, there's this one, there's that one, there's the school, there's the principal, there's the board of the school. All of these different people, they can worry about it. We need to be asking ourselves, no, what can I do to make this world into a better place? What can I do to make the Jewish community stronger? What can I do to make South Africa stronger, Israel stronger? How can I make this world into a better place? How can I make my social interactions and the communities of friends that I have to be more in keeping with what the ultimate of Jewish values is all about? So it's that sense of changing self-perspective. And in a way, social media has given everybody a platform. Social media has given, there are no barriers to entry. You don't need to have any kind of special office to do it. The world has been democratized. There's a fascinating book that you may want to read. It's under the title, The End of Big. It means the end of big institutions. We live in a world where it's the end of big institutions. That means each and every single one of you are the institution. You are the establishment, or you're not the establishment, but you are leaders. And we're all leaders. And that becomes a completely paradigm-shifting way to view yourself. Not to view yourself as a consumer of receiving ideas, but being part of producing and part of leading. And that's where I think that the Torah is so empowering, which is, I think, is such an important thing as when you're thinking about the power of influence. The starting point has got to be, you need the courage, but you also need to have the sense of moral clarity around it. What are the values that you need? And where are we going to find those values? And that's why we have this most incredible treasure house of values that God has given us, which is contained in all of the sources which we have. The sources, which is the Torah, the Talmud, Pirkei Avot, all of the different elements of who we are and where we come from. And so what I wanted to say to you on a practical level is two things. One is, start to view yourself as a leader. Define leadership as influence. Take responsibility for what that means. Number two is make Torah learning a daily part of your life. And I think this is particularly relevant when thinking, if you're in grade 12, those who are in grade 11, you're starting to come to the end of your formal Jewish education. And this is the question that I pose to each and every single one of you. Does Jewish education end in grade 12? Does it end and say, well, okay, I'm done with maths and history, and now I'm done with Judaism? And my appeal to you today is to say this, that as the future leaders of this community and the future leaders of the world, your Jewish education can't stop on the day of graduation, because Judaism is too important for that. And I say that with due respect to maths and to science, and I say that as a person with 3 university degrees on top of my smicha. So I respect the concept of education, but I say to you that Judaism is not just a subject, and it's not just an education. It is values for life. It is the whole framing of what your life is. And the only way to access that is to know what it says. And so that journey of learning is a journey which you need to take day by day, but make it a part of your life every single day. Every single day, make sure to learn something new in Judaism. And if any of you want to start a shiur in Pirkei Avot, we can start a WhatsApp group. I'm happy to send to you a Mishnah on Pirkei Avot every single day on a WhatsApp group if you want to join that. You have tremendous opportunities to learn here in the city, the incredible learning that's going on, but do learning each and every single day. And I want to tell you a secret that I can share over the last 18 years as chief rabbi, because people may say, well, how did you stay sane for all of these 18 years? And I can tell you, one, with all of the travails and the things and the fact that I'm still smiling, the reason I'm still smiling after all of these years is because every single day I made a personal commitment to myself to learn Torah every single day. And that I know that time, and I set aside substantial time. It's not just 5 or 10 minutes. Each one of you must work out your own time. That time for me is a time when my head is clear, my heart is still, and I have an opportunity to connect with Hashem's wisdom that brings a sense of peace and tranquility and inner strength. It also gives me the clarity of vision that I need each and every single day. And so I want to say to you this: if you learn Torah each and every single day of your life, make time to learn Torah every single day of your life, I promise you that from that you will find happiness and tranquility of spirit. It will be your guiding force in everything that you do. It will light up the path of everything that you do in life, but that means looking at Judaism not as a subject. It's not a subject that you tick and you do your marks and then you're done and it's behind you and you throw away the books and you walk out from the exam and you never have to look at the subject again. It's something that you live with. And so when I look around this room and I see your faces filled with the sense of anticipation for a bright future, and that I pray that God, brings you that bright future that each and every single one of you is capable of. What I say to you as you approach that future, think of yourself not as a follower, but as a leader. Think of yourself as an influencer, not as an influencer in the way that the world looks at influence, but in a way of being an influencer to influence other people to become better. And then have your compass, have your sense of heading north, of knowing where you need to go, and the way you'll get that is through learning Torah. And my practical advice to you on that is to do it, make the commitment to yourself to learn something new from any one of our Torah sources every single day. Find something new to learn, that no day goes by without learning something new. And that if you do that, that will be life-changing. The accumulation of that will transform your life and will give you the peace of mind, the happiness, the clarity of vision to have within your soul, but then also to make the world into a better place. So I've so loved this interaction. It's been an absolute joy, and I want to wish all of the grade 12s. I want to wish all of the grade 12s tremendous God's blessings, Hashem's blessings for your year, that you should achieve the marks that you are striving to, that your lives should go on a path of blessing, and that most important of all, that you should be people who make this world into a better place through your incredible and inspiring leadership. God bless you. A joy to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.